Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Slip Safety Show. My name is Christian Harris, and as well as being the host of the show, I'm the founder of Slip Safety Services. My guest today is Neil Adebowale. He's a director of Partners, which is a specialist insurance broker, and their real focus is on health clubs, gyms and leisure centres, as well as the wider leisure realm. So he talks a bit about trampoline parks, for example. I thought this was a really interesting conversation and very useful if you need to think about the benefits of risk management within this sector, but also more broadly as well. Neil talks about why there's value in choosing a specialist broker to help you, how you should go about choosing your insurance provider, the sorts of things you should be looking for, and a bit about how insurers and brokers can help in terms of practical hands-on stuff, including insurance risk management bursaries. So as always, this should be of interest to you if, like me, you are interested in the world being a safer, cleaner and more hygienic place to be. If you enjoy the show, please give us a subscribe on whichever medium you're consuming this. And if you know anybody that you think might benefit from watching or listening, please do introduce them to us. We'd be really appreciative of that. So without further ado, let's get into the interview with Neil. Neil Adebowale, welcome to the Slip Safety Show.
Thank you, Christian.
Good to have you here, and thanks for sharing a bit of time. Some of the people watching or listening to this may well have heard of you, but for those that haven't had that pleasure yet, do you want to give a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Yeah, so Neil Adebowale, I am a director of Partners, Partners is a new and exciting brand within the insurance sector. My company previously was Independence, and Independence were very much focused on insurance for the leisure sector.
Yeah.
Having done that for 20 years, effectively insuring businesses across that sector, including gyms, health clubs, trampoline parks, family entertainment, and leisure centres and the like. So a range of leisure operators, and working very closely in partnership with those. So a lot of experience really in working with those leisure operators.
Yeah. And you're also involved with ukactive, I think. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we set up a strategic partnership with ukactive from the beginning of this year. That's been proving to be really useful. Obviously, a large part of that was all the events and the networking that we're going to be attending, which has been slightly affected in current circumstances. Yeah. But trying to reach out and keep in contact with the sector in other means.
Yeah. Have you seen, just as an aside, have you seen the photo of the Last Supper on Zoom that's been doing the rounds on LinkedIn and stuff?
I have seen that one. Yeah.
That's your ukactive networking for the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously insurance is a massive market, and you guys, as you say, are pretty specialist in health, fitness and leisure. And leisure is, clearly a unique market of its own. It's very interesting buildings with people doing potentially slightly more higher risk activities than they might be doing in other buildings, and all sorts of plant and machinery and various other things. So what value do you think a kind of a specialist broker would bring in the leisure sector specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we've chosen that specialism for that exact reason, really, Christian, in terms of being able to add more value to for the operators. Really, some of the key things that I think a specialist broker adds. Firstly, they already know the market, and they know the business of the operator. So as a starting point, they'll have an understanding. There's still a lot more to do in terms of fact finding and understanding what that individual business does, because every operator is going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
But actually understanding the key risks that that business has, understanding just when we're talking about operational procedures, for example, if you don't have the expertise as a broker in that sector, you're not going to understand the language, the culture, and everything else that flows through that sector. So that's one of the key points in properly understanding that. And then flowing on from that, the additional knowledge you have, a specialist broker will be able to advise around and assist in risk management. So not just in arranging the insurance product. And they'll also have a better understanding of the sector, which will allow them to better negotiate solutions for the insurers, tailor cover properly, and hopefully also generate cost savings through that knowledge as well of the sector. So there's an array of benefits, I think, that a specialist broker, if they're doing their role properly, can really bring and add value for that operator.
Yeah. And how big roughly are you guys in terms of, the number of sites that you would be looking after?
So if we just look at our leisure specialism, as we do other things outside of that, but within the leisure sector, we are looking after about 800 gyms and health clubs. There's a range of different leisure centres that we'd look after. We currently look after about 75 trampoline parks across the UK as well.
Interesting
So
market.
very, very interesting market, and obviously from a risk point of view, that would be potentially quite different to what we focus on for gyms and health clubs. So they're a range of different businesses, but we have a fairly large share, a large footprint within the leisure sector. Across some of our those specialist areas, gyms, health clubs, trampoline parks. We are the UK's leading broker in terms of footprint there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And from my perspective, I obviously deal with a number of the insurers, and it's always helpful to have a broker that knows the sector, because sometimes the insurer can know more about the sector that they're covering than the broker, and the broker obviously has a key role in terms of the client and what's going to happen and stuff, and that can sometimes be a bit of a frustration. So it's nice to see some good specialist knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult to do the job properly, of being able to negotiate and represent your client properly if you don't understand their business. I think for us, that's key. Yeah.
And how would I guess everybody watching this that operates a club is going to have insurance of one way or another, because they have to. But what's the sort of process that, let's say somebody's watching or listening to this and they think, oh, this Neil guy knows what he's talking about, I should speak to him. How does it all work, and how should people go about trying to decide where to place their insurance?
Yeah, well, we've kind of covered off in terms of using a specialist broker. That's important, and really, that person will help you with the recommendation of what solution works best for you. I think probably the key bit of advice around that really is choose who you want to work with carefully. There's no point doing an exercise where you say, well, I want to review my insurances, so I'm going to contact 10 different companies, and then you can't really spend the time that you need in order to properly engage with that person for them to understand your business and actually get the best solution. So you end up diluting down the whole process, and you don't actually necessarily end up with an effective solution at the end. So you might think having a number of different people involved in the process in searching for an alternative insurance arrangement is going to help. I would suggest actually select 2, which might be your existing provider and one other, to do that review process for you, and spend the time with them to engage properly so they understand your business. You provide them with the information they need to give them to arm them effectively to go out and find the best solution for you.
Yeah.
And probably the other key point is engage early as well, because if you start that process 2-3 months before renewal, great, the broker will have time to understand your business and discuss with insurers. If you go to them last day, it's going to be a fairly rushed job. That obviously varies depending on the size and complexity of your insurances. So if we were dealing with a leisure trust with 10 sites, then that's going to take more time than an independent single site gym, for example. So we would want to be engaging with those larger businesses much earlier. But nevertheless, whatever business size you are, time is important. So whilst we can turn around last minute inquiries, it's more challenging, and it doesn't always result in the best outcome for the client.
Yeah, you're not likely to get the very best outcome doing anything last minute. We've been talking a lot we're recording this obviously during the whole coronavirus crisis, as you mentioned, and we've been talking to clubs a lot about getting ready to reopen, and cleanliness and various other things and hygiene they need to think about. And it's no point leaving it to the last minute when the government says, right, you can open up next week, and trying to rush it because you just won't get it right. So
yeah, absolutely, good
to be prepared. And obviously, well, I say it's obvious to you and I because we know about it, but over the last say 12 months, we've seen not a few, but a couple, and maybe growing number of insurers that are starting to remove themselves from leisure and hospitality as a marketplace. So there are fewer insurers willing to underwrite that kind of business. What sort of effect is that having on options for customers and prices and offers that they're getting?
Yeah, I don't think it's fully bitten yet. I think that choice for customers will potentially reduce again over the next 12 months. So we're going into what we call in insurance a hardening market, which basically means that there are fewer insurers willing to write business, or they're able to write less of it. Their capacity has reduced. So as we go into that, eventually we will see rates increasing, options reducing, and so on. But as I say, I don't think that's actually bitten yet.
Yeah.
And that will be something to come. So really, I mean, we stay on our toes, speak to insurers, have a range of options available. In certain sectors where the insurance requirements are very specific, and there's a small number of insurers able to do those. So I think certain areas that are affected, like people that have provide inflatables or so on.
Yeah.
Expect very niche areas of leisure like that have already been severely affected by that trend. I guess more common areas like gyms and health clubs, if we use that as an example in leisure, there are a number of providers. So if one drops out, it's not going to have a dramatic impact yet. If that worsens and the capacity reduces further, then that will start to have an impact on those options that are available. My advice really on that to operators would be you can't control that factor in terms of who drops out of the market. We can't control that as a broker. All you can do is put yourself in a position where you're best prepared to deal with that. And the best way to do that is to have good quality risk management in place, make the claims experience as good as possible, really. And no matter what happens in the market, you'll be best placed to ride that out. Whereas someone who's had a string of claims or doesn't look good in terms of their risk management history, their approach, will struggle in a hardening market to find insurance. So really it's a case of taking all the right steps now to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I saw a quote which was advising people from a client perspective about insurance, and they were saying that your role isn't to buy insurance, it's to sell risk. So you need to basically position yourself and pitch yourself so that you're the best possible risk that you can sell yourself to the insurer, and that's the way of getting the best offers and rates and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think there is a slight difference in the buying pattern between, let's say, very, very small micro businesses and the larger ones, where the larger the scale, the larger the risk, the more insurers are going to look into that in detail.
Yeah.
So above a certain size, they're going to very carefully scrutinise the risk management approach, the claims history. I mean, a lot of the independent gyms we work with haven't ever had a claim.
Yeah.
So the it looks fine on paper because they've not had a claim. But obviously they're paying a very small premium as a proportion of what their potential risk could be. So that's a different situation where they won't necessarily be reflected in their claims experience, but they have to be able to still demonstrate good risk management through what they do on a day-to-day basis, through their operation and everything else.
That's an interesting point, because I've been having a lot of conversations with people in the industry, and we've been talking about the return of members and saying that, your small independent club will probably see a bigger uptake more quickly of members coming back because there's more of a community feel and so on. I wonder whether actually there's something around insurance and health and safety as well, because you'd expect that those types of clubs are going to have accidents because accidents happen of whatever type, but the fact they're not having any claims, do you think that might be something down to that kind of community feel and the relationships that the owner of the club or the manager has got with each individual customer?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I would say, Christian, we work with a number of community-focused gyms, and generally the number of personal injury claims they have, the frequency of personal injury claims is significantly lower. I haven't got the stats to the tip of my fingers at the moment, but you can see it's a specific discussion we've had with insurers when we're working with them. It's not to say that a different business model can't manage risk well, but they have to face the fact that where we work with some of the smaller budget chains, and the nature of their business is that people are going to make a claim if they have an accident there, irrespective of whether they're taking all the right measures. It's transactional. Where someone is paying £20 a month and they don't necessarily have a very close relationship with the owners of the business, no barrier there to them putting in a claim when they have an accident. And that's not to say that every person that has an accident will make a claim, but it's the likelihood is far greater. In a community-based gym, it'd be really frowned upon by other members if someone makes a claim against them. They feel a loyalty to the owners of that business. It really is a factor. So when we look at the claim stats, it's not just that. It's not saying necessarily that those businesses are managed much better. It's also about the quality of the relationship, and that has an impact on the frequency of claims that we see coming through.
Yeah. Is there anything, you'll know this better than me because you have the data, I've just got anecdotal evidence, but in my sort of niche area of risk management, I've found over the years that the private clubs seem to get a higher frequency of claims than local authority type centres. And I wondered as well whether there's something there around, perhaps it's not the community feel, or it might be partly that, but whether it's kind of, it's the council and they haven't got any money. So whereas, a Virgin or a David Lloyd or whoever, they've got loads of money, so I'll put a claim in. Is there anything to that, do you think? Or
I don't think so. It's difficult to run the stats because we need to know what we don't have is to be able to monitor that against the frequency of usage within that gym. So but there's nothing, having looked at the I guess the local authority or trust-run centres that we work with compared to independent or other privately owned gyms, I've not seen that particular trend coming out. So it's not one it's not one I'm familiar with, Christian, in terms of that particular pattern. I could see it in principle where you're going, but I haven't got any statistics.
No, I've not got any hard data. It's just something, just kind of anecdotally from the perspective of if you look at size of club and usage and how frequency of claims, but again, it's not a big enough sample size to say that there's anything there that's it's not worth writing a white paper about, that's for sure.
No, exactly. No, I don't. Say there may be, but it's a difficult one to measure, and haven't really seen that. We see claims at local authority gyms, and we see claims at private gyms. That you're going to get them anywhere.
Yeah. So what are the biggest risk factors then for a health club? And it could obviously differ, between types, but with sort of as a broad brush, if you look at the sector, in terms of specifically not so much accidents, but kind of claims and actual financial losses that might affect people's premiums and cause them to pay out some money.
Yeah, well, I think you've made an important distinction there between. I think the focus is always on what the accidents are, the public liability section of the policy, which covers you against the personal injury claims. That's usually where you expect most of the claims and payouts for a gym to be. And I'll come back to talk about some specific accidents or claim data we've seen around that. But first, I'll just cover the point that outside of the public liability, actually, we are seeing with gyms and health clubs, the larger risk area actually being from the property damage. Yeah. And this might just be across our client base, where we do try to work closely with clients on their risk management. So whilst they've got the we've got the public liability, the risk of personal injury reduced through good quality risk management, that then means the balance in terms of the claims is being made up more from property damage. The biggest trend we're actually seeing is escape of water, which is a major problem generally for the insurance industry.
It is, yeah.
And I think that's across. So even in blocks of flats or offices or everything else, insurers are seeing water damage claims.
Yeah.
But the specific factors to a gym, in terms of the amount of wet facilities, the use of showers, plant and equipment, and so on, that does mean there's probably a greater chance of water damage claims arising there, and that's been a continuous trend. Yeah. And then obviously the subsequent business interruption that arises from that as well. So unfortunately, we've had several gyms that have to close for a matter of months whilst flooring is repaired. The studio's dried out. So we've seen a few bad leaks, and also a high number of smaller ones as well, which maybe impact the business for a shorter period of time. So that's sort of what we're seeing as a general trend across gyms in general. If we just sort of drill down into the personal injury claims that we are seeing coming through, traditionally, slips, trips and falls have always been the highest. And for gyms, the last time we ran data, we were looking at around about 60% of the claims arising from slips, trips and falls, which is, I don't think that's that far off the stats for the general UK stats, is it, Christian, in terms of frequency?
I mean, as you know, getting good claims data out of insurers is like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes. But I think most insurers would say that across their whole book, different sectors, you're looking at probably about 35 to 40% of volume would be slips, trips and falls. but obviously some sectors will be a lot less and other sectors more. So
and obviously with the leisure sector, you've got high footfall, members of the public coming in and out. Slip, strips and falls is the obvious risk. Now, where the health and fitness industry has changed over time, with a lot of the models now taking out wet facilities from their premises, I think that has had an impact in terms of the number of slip, strips and falls claims we're seeing. So if we just looked across our client base, so many have moved from the larger gyms are going to a model where they don't have wet facilities. So whilst they may have opened wet facilities initially, any new openings don't include pools, saunas, steam rooms. They just include focus on a gym and a scaled down model. So that's had, that's not just budget gyms. That's largely across the sector. The number of full facility gyms we're seeing is reduced. So that has an impact. So I think if we ran the data now, the number of slip, strips and falls would have probably come down from that figure. The next level down is equipment failure. So equipment failure at gyms, and that's probably something you would expect. Most commonly, that tends to be cable machines where or fixed resistance equipment where a cable snaps.
Right.
By far the most common type of equipment failure we see.
And that could cause quite a nasty injury, I guess.
Yeah, it can do. A lot of the time it's they're minor injuries, the claims, but it has the potential to cause a bad injury. Depending on which piece of equipment it happens on. And if you think about the movements where it's most likely to cause the claim, probably the lat pull down machine is the one where we see that the most, because of the nature of the movement with the bar coming down onto someone. So, we see those type of claims. That's something that is aware of. It can be managed to an extent. There may, even with the best risk management, there still will be occasional equipment failure, but the importance of daily checking, of regular servicing of equipment, and so on is essential really for that one. So if that's well managed, the risk of that goes down, but as I say, we still see them coming in.
Accidents will happen.
And accidents will happen. And I think a lot of people expect that accidents will happen in classes or whilst they're actually, fitness related injuries, which actually we see relatively few of. Not saying that you should totally ignore that risk, but in terms of people getting injured in performing an activity within a class, or having a terrible injury because they've lifted weights that are too heavy or straining themselves on a treadmill, anything like that. Those type of injury, or certainly in terms of manifesting themselves as claims, we see relatively few compared to the equipment failure and the slip, strips and falls are the big ones. Really.
I think there's something around, this might be another of my crazy hypotheses, but we'll see. But I think there's something around, if you're kind of knowingly doing something active, you kind of know that there is some sort of inherent risk in that. So, if you're doing a dance class, well, of course you could twist your ankle or, or fall over and hurt your wrist, or because, that's just inherently within the activity. Whereas, if you're doing a lat pull down, or if you're walking on the poolside, you don't expect the cable to snap or a slip to happen. So I think there might be something there around whether people, accidents maybe are happening, but people then maybe are less apt to put a claim in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, if you go to play a game of football on a Sunday, and you get an injury in that game of football, you don't think to make a claim against anyone. You almost go into that game expecting, or very aware of the possibility that you could get injured, and as with many of us, it's probably happened several times at some point. You're expecting that, and the same with any physical activity. I think the onus is on the operator to provide a safe environment, safe equipment, and make sure that the right measures have been taken to ensure someone can exercise safely. But if it's a sporting related injury, then you're absolutely right. Someone injures themselves in that way, they're less likely to want to try and bring a claim, unless it's very clear that the operator's been negligent in some way.
Yeah.
And we see that specifically in the trampoline parks we mentioned before is a good example of that, where if every injury that occurred resulted in a claim, then the insurers will probably be out of business, I would have thought. But the fact is that the operators do take a lot of steps to provide that safe environment, and provide guidance in how to do the activity safely. But people will still get carried away and do things that are quite dangerous, and they may injure themselves. And there's not, or just by the very nature of the activity, you twist an ankle or strain an ankle or whatever, and that is part and parcel of it, really. You can't do any more as an operator to manage that risk out, and we don't really see most of those coming through as claims. So it can apply to any area of the leisure sector. That principle really is reflected in the HSE advice as well around RIDDOR reporting. There's a specific section on sporting injuries within RIDDOR, which kind of acknowledges that they don't want to see hundreds of thousands of reports for someone pulling a muscle during sport, because it's not going to it's going to distort the figures. So it's reflected in that as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And my sister incidentally broke her leg quite badly trampolining when she was little, but she was I'm sure they wouldn't happen they wouldn't allow this nowadays, but she and my dad were on a trampoline, and they ended up bouncing out of sync. So if you think my dad's weight he'd gone down, his weight was coming up as she was coming down, and he was, I think she would have been only very little, maybe 6 or 7 or some under 10 anyway. So that wasn't very nice. But she's fine now. She's fully recovered and goes out running and doing all those things. So it's fine. But,
that's good.
Yeah.
It's double bouncing. It's called. It's one of the number one rules in trampoline parks. No double bouncing. Like that.
Yeah, I'm very conscious of that. We've got only a tiny little sort of a metre by metre trampoline in our garden, which is getting a lot of use at the moment as we're all at home. But my 2 boys are 5 and 2, so I'm sort of saying you can't go on there together, even though they want to, just to try and avoid.
I'm usually the bore at parties and so on when there's a trampoline there, telling the kids that they have to go on one at a time.
Yeah.
But having seen what I've seen now, I can't ignore it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how do obviously risk management is important, as we've said, both in terms of stopping people from getting hurt, stopping claims, and protecting your premiums moving forward. How do brokers such as yourself and insurers, practically help clients to manage their risk better? What sort of options are there available to clients to benefit from in that regard?
That's a really good question, actually. So firstly, I mean, we wrote a risk management guide ourselves. I think it was 2014 it was published. It's the first one I'm aware of. So correct me if I'm wrong if someone else has written one, but we wrote a practical risk management guide for gyms and health clubs, and we have provided that to all of our clients, which is a really useful guide on a lot of the practical steps you need to take to better manage your risk. The reason we did that is where we've got 800 gyms and health clubs, whilst in some cases people want a very personalised approach to their risk, just having that information out there was really useful for people to dip in and out of when they had. So we had sections on there about running children's classes, for example, or outdoor classes, how to inspection of equipment and what the considerations were. So that kind of stuff. So I guess that advice at distance is really helpful. We're going to be doing more of that. So we're working in partnership with UK Active now to look at rewriting that guide, because it's quite out of date now, as you can imagine. Legislation has changed. So I've actually just had a draft through yesterday of the revised version. So we're working with, I guess, an experienced risk management or health and safety professional, UK Active, and getting input from the operators as well that work closely with UK Active. So that's one element. I think for certain businesses may need a more bespoke approach to that. And this is particularly important where you may have risks that are more complex, or where you're of a size where managing the risks across the group is by its nature is more complex, more involved, and insurers can get involved, and brokers as well, on a far more bespoke basis in that way. So one of the things they may look at doing is working closely with you to identify where your key risks are coming from. I say on a bespoke basis, because we can tell you that it's going to be slip, strips and falls or whatever, but that might not apply to every business.
Not for everybody,
of it. So that may vary. So identifying that and then putting in place solutions to manage that. Where the policy will allow for it, we are able to negotiate what we call risk management funding as well. I think the term bursary or risk management funding is commonly used. So that would be targeted at an area that the insurers think is either needs attention or needs strengthening, or they want to work on, or the operator themselves has identified it and says this is something we really want to work on. So that could be used in areas such as one in terms of the slip, strips and falls that we talked about before, assessing those, identifying them and putting solutions in place. It could be used in training of staff. So management training is something that fund is often used for as well, in terms of bringing out the knowledge of managers, putting them through IOS training, for example, that type of stuff that insurers would be keen to get involved in, working in partnership with the broker and the operators to bring those kind of things about. So there's that element of practical support, and also potentially providing other, so sourcing those expert suppliers as well of those. So you as an operator may have identified what your issue is that needs addressing, but you don't know how to address that or who to go to. So potentially there's a supplier that the insurer has worked closely with that can help you as well in that area. So that's another important element of support. And when we also, I can't speak for every broker, but we would get involved closely as well, where we're someone's wanting a more bespoke or tailored approach to their risk management. We get involved in working with key personnel within the business to assist. We attend the insurers' surveys. We can attend management meetings as well to do a section on risk management and safety, and even to the extent we can deliver some what we'd usually term risk awareness training as well. So really focused on getting the key people within a business understanding what the risks are to that business and what the essential controls and steps they need to take as well. Just really, that's a nice one to do. The reason why operators quite like that is if you have someone, let's say there's a health and safety manager, or whether it falls with the operations director or the managing director to try and motivate their staff to be focused on that. It's sometimes that message is more difficult coming internally.
Yeah.
When you have an external person to deliver that, it's sometimes more effective in that way. It's not that we're necessarily saying anything that's groundbreaking or revolutionary in terms of insight. It's having that other perspective to reinforce a message.
Yeah, well, it's like, why should I listen to this bloke? You know, effectively, isn't it? And it's having that credibility of being third party and being a specialist and an expert. You know, always kind of helps. Yeah, it's interesting because we do a lot of work, as you know, with you guys and with insurers and on the bursary point, and it's amazing how few people have actually heard of it, and it's a shame because I know with some of the big brokers that run, I don't know if the right word is a scheme, but they kind of act as an insurer, and they run they have these big ways of writing policies for people, and they automatically take a very small percentage of the premium and put it into a risk management fund. But most of that money just never gets spent, and it's sitting there and it should be used, and it just hasn't been communicated well enough that opportunity exists. So I think it's really good that we're talking about it, and that you're proactively looking for opportunities to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the opportunities are out there. I think I'd just perhaps point out on that point that insurers will be looking at the profile of that risk. So in terms of assigning an appropriate risk management funding, so obviously there's going to be premium there to pay for it, and the risk profile has got to be right. So effectively, if that client that operator has suffered a large number of water damage claims, like we were talking about before, they're not necessarily going to want to spend that money on reducing the public liability risk, the personal injury side of it. They would want that to be focused very much on what the problem has been and what's costing the insurer money. So they'll take a focused approach. So it's sometimes about having a bit more of a plan when you're asking for those cases. Sometimes there's a commercial aspect to it because the insurer wants to work with you and so on. But there has to be a determined benefit for the insurer as well, because if we're looking at eliminating risk, it's worth them spending that money. Because it's going to help the insurer in the long run as well. So that's what the role of the broker is, really, to do that side and negotiate it really effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you've got one site or two sites and you're paying £200 a year per site on a 2-year contract, you're not going to get given a 10 grand insurance risk management bursary, are you?
No, you're not. No one's paying £200 a year.
No, of course, I'm being a bit facetious.
I get your point. That that's it really. It's
I think that's one of the challenges. That's one of the challenges that these bigger brokers have, where they're taking 1.5% or whatever and putting it into a pot, but 1.5% of £2 grand a year there's not really much you can do for that. So they're trying to think about what they can do to make that money of use in some way, rather than just sort of sitting there and expiring, because that doesn't help anybody. The client would have been better off paying less to start with. So
I mean that's why, as say, for the majority of clients that don't necessarily need or want that bespoke approach, that's why we look at things like the risk management guide. And then obviously when something else does come up that they need to look into specifically, we can do that on a case-by-case basis. So for smaller independent gyms, the risk management guide and then our regular advice and updates are an important part of the ongoing risk management advice and support that they get. With a larger group, they may want a more bespoke approach. And they may want to pay for that. They may want, we may be able to get funding. but it's very much doing what's appropriate for the requirements of the customer. There are different ways, but overall, there needs to be a focus on that risk management element. However it's achieved, there are different ways to get to the end point, but there are a range of different ways we can assist with that.
Yeah. Great. Well, so thanks very much for your time, Neil. I'm conscious of not keeping you too long. So if people are consuming this and this all sounds interesting to them, which I'm sure it will, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, or to get a copy of your risk management guide, or follow you and maybe have a chat and see if you can help them?
Well, very happy to provide copies of the risk management guide, because it's going to be rewritten soon, so we probably have to get rid of the old stock. But
free giveaway.
Yeah, exactly. The best way, drop me an email. So it's neil.adebowale@partnersand.com. I know that's a complete mouthful, but I understand the captions for that should be up.
Yeah.
The other way, you can contact us on the phone. We like to pick the phone up, so we'll supply the phone number for contacting us directly, or speaking to me directly. Happy to take anyone's call and give some initial advice, consultation, or so on around that. So that would definitely be the best way. Just drop us an email or give us a call, and we will be straight back to you, I'm sure.
All right. And any social media or any Instagrams or anything like that to have a look at?
We do. The social media will be a lot more active going forward, but it's 4GMINS, at 4GMINS, our Twitter handle, and our website, www.partnersand.com.
Perfect.
So we'll be providing regular news feeds. So we've recently launched the new Partners and website, and one of the key things we want to be doing is providing more content specific to our sector on there. So I'm working closely with our marketing and comms team on that.
Makes sense. I think anything that we in the risk management world can do to promote the benefits of managing risk better is going to be helpful for clients, but more importantly, it's going to be helpful to their clients and customers, because they're going to have fewer injuries or incidents or whatever it might be. So I think it's a worthy battle to be fighting with you.
Yeah, great. No, thanks very much, Christian. Absolutely.
No problem. All right. Thanks very much, Neil. We'll see you sometime soon.